A quiet, reclusive single father named Ethan drives home after a long shift when he sees three little girls standing alone in the pouring rain, shivering and frightened. Despite his cautious nature, something in him pulls over. Ethan battles his past traumas and insecurities as he takes the girls home. Child services gets involved, but a mysterious lack of records and a shared connection to Ethan's late wife raises questions. As the girls settle in, Ethan starts to rediscover joy. The triplets Leela, Zoe, and the bring light into his dark world, but his own emotional scars threaten to push them away. The rain hadn't let up for hours. Heavy drops drum the windshield of Ethan Reed's old pickup truck as he wound his way down the familiar backroads that led to his cabin on the edge of town. The world outside was a blur of gray, trees swaying violently in the wind, their bare branches scraping at the night sky. The kind of night that made most people rush home, lock their doors, and wrap themselves in blankets. Ethan was no different. Solitude had become his safe place since Claire passed away. His world was quiet now, predictable, and painfully empty. He adjusted the heater, rubbing one hand over his scruffy jaw. It had been another long day at the auto shop, the kind of day where the grease and grime felt easier to manage than human interaction. Ethan liked machines as if they didn't ask questions, didn't pry into the aches still rooted deep in his chest. Grief had become a silent passenger in his life, always present, never demanding, until nights like this, when it pressed against his ribs, heavy and unrelenting. As he rounded a bend near an old broken streetlight, something moved in the shadows up ahead. He squinted, then instinctively hit the brakes, the truck groaning to a halt on the wet pavement. Three small figures stood on the side of the road, barely illuminated by the flickering lamp above them. Children, tiny, shivering shapes soaked to the bone, their faces pale with cold and fear. No umbrellas, no coats, no adult in sight. Ethan's heart stuttered. Without thinking, he threw the truck in park and climbed out into the storm. Rain plastered his hoodie to his skin within seconds, but he barely noticed. "Hey!" he called out, keeping his voice calm and low as he approached. "Are you okay?" The girls clung to one another, their eyes wide and frightened. The smallest of them took a step back. They looked identical to triplets, maybe. Long dark curls matted against their cheeks flushed from the cold. One of them spoke in a voice so soft, it nearly got swallowed by the wind. "We're sorry." "You don't need to be sorry," Ethan said gently. "I just want to help." "Are you hurt?" They shook their heads slowly. The tallest of the three, who seemed to be the leader, stepped slightly forward. "We're not supposed to talk to strangers." "Well, that's smart," Ethan said, kneeling so he was eye level with them. "But it's raining, and it's really cold. Do you know where your parents are?" The girls looked at each other, and something in their silence broke Ethan's heart. The leader whispered, "They left. They told us to wait here, but they didn't come back." Ethan felt a sick weight settle in his stomach. "How long have you been waiting?" "I don't know," she said. "A long time." He looked at them again, the tiny arms wrapped around each other, shoes soaked, lips trembling. Everything in him screamed to act. "My name's Ethan. I live nearby. Why don't we go there, get warm, and then we'll figure out how to find your parents, okay?" They hesitated, their eyes darting between each other. The one on the left, the quietest, whispered, "Can we trust you?" The question nearly undid him. "Yes," he said softly, "you can." He opened the back door of the truck, grabbed the thick flannel blanket he always kept behind the seat, and draped it over their small shoulders. They huddled together in the warmth as he turned up the heater and called emergency services. Back at the cabin, Ethan moved fast. He dug through old drawers, searching for clothes Claire had once set aside for charity. Somehow, miraculously, he found 3 small sweaters and pajamas that fit the girls well enough. While they changed in the bathroom, whispering to one another in hushed tones, he grilled cheese sandwiches and warmed milk on the stove. When they re-emerged, they looked clean but fragile, like delicate flowers still trembling after a storm. They sat on the couch, hands wrapped around their mugs, and watched him silently. "What are your names?" he asked gently. The one who had spoken first lifted her chin. "I'm Leela." "That's Zoe," she said, nodding to the shy one. "And Ivy," pointing to the one braiding her hair absent-mindedly. "Leela, Zoe, and Ivy," he repeated. "Pretty names." They nodded. Leela asked quietly, "Do we have to go back to the road now?" "No," Ethan said, surprised by the question. "You're staying here tonight, somewhere warm and safe." When Child Protective Services arrived later that night, the social worker, Miss Rodriguez, was kind but clearly troubled. "They say they were left on the roadside. No ID, no files, no record of any recent adoptions or placements under these names. It's like they don't exist." Ethan frowned. "What happens now?" "They'll have to come with me," she said. "We'll place them in temporary care while we investigate." Ethan looked at the girls, already curled up on his couch, eyes drooping from exhaustion. Leela stirred when she heard Miss Rodriguez's voice. "We don't want to go." Without realizing he'd made a decision, Ethan spoke. "They can stay here, with me." The social worker blinked. "You'd be willing to foster them?" "It's a lot to ask." "I don't care. They need somewhere safe. I've got the room. I'll do the paperwork." That night, for the first time in years, the house wasn't quiet. The girls laughed softly as they brushed each other's hair and made up stories about the shapes in the ceiling. Ethan sat in the hallway, listening, unsure how his life had changed so fast, but knowing it had. The next morning brought the real test. Pancakes were met with giggles, spilled syrup, and sticky fingers. Zoe finally spoke more than 2 words. Ivy asked if he knew how to braid. Leela insisted on washing her own plate. There was something gentle in their chaos that softened Ethan in places he thought had been hardened permanently. Over the next few weeks, the girls stayed. Paperwork was filed. Background checks were run. No biological parents came forward. No family members. Nothing. It was like they had been dropped into the world from nowhere. Ethan began to learn their patterns. Ivy liked to hum while she colored. Zoe needed night lights in every room. Leela carried a stuffed lion named Mr. Roar and checked on her sisters like a tiny guardian. And somehow, without meaning to, Ethan fell into fatherhood. Not the kind he had imagined with Clary Langone dreams of a nursery they never filled, but something new, something messier, more real. They drew him pictures, asked him for hugs, told him they loved him without hesitation. One cold morning, while helping Ivy zip her coat, Ethan froze. Her eyes, a hazel with a hint of gold around the iris, were exactly like Claire's. Identical. He hadn't noticed it before, but now that he'd seen it, he couldn't unsee it. That afternoon, he pulled out an old photo of Claire as a child. The resemblance was uncanny. Leela's cheekbones, Zoe's nose, Ivy's smile, heart pounding. He contacted Miss Rodriguez. "Is there any chance they're connected to Claire?" She frowned. "Not unless Claire had children no one knew about." "She didn't," Ethan said. "Boot to Broken Bar. She donated eggs. Before we got married, she wanted to help other families. It was anonymous." A few weeks and legal hurdles later, DNA tests confirmed it. The girls were born from embryos Claire had donated years before her death. They weren't biologically his, but they were hers, part of her, a part he thought he'd lost forever. Ethan sat in his truck for an hour after hearing the news, staring at the trees, trying to process the enormity of it all. The girls weren't just 3 children he'd rescued. They were miracles, pieces of Claire. Fate hadn't dropped them into his life by accident. It had guided them home. He gathered them in the living room that night, kneeling in front of them as they huddled on the couch. "I want to tell you something," he began, hard thudding. "Your Mama Broken Bar, your biological Mama Broken Bar, was someone I loved very much. Her name was Claire. She was kind and smart and brave, and she wanted to help people. Even before she passed away, she helped create you." The girls listened quietly, eyes wide. "That means a broken bar, and why a broken bar? You're part of her. And that means I want to be your dad, not just for now, forever." Tears rolled silently down Zoe's cheeks as she nodded. Leela hugged him first. Ivy followed. "We knew you were meant to be ours," Leela whispered. The court hearings were emotional, but by the end, the judge granted Ethan full guardianship. The girls took his last name. A new family, born not of blood alone but of love, healing, and a little miracle on a rainy night. The cabin that once echoed with silence now rang with laughter, footsteps, bedtime stories, and the occasional sibling squabble. Claire's photo remained on the mantel, but Ethan no longer looked at it with pain. Now, he saw it with gratitude. One rainy evening nearly a year later, Ethan sat on the porch, sipping coffee as the girls played with flashlights in the yard. He thought back to that night at the headlights, the shadows, the fear in their eyes, and realized how close he'd come to missing everything. But he hadn't. Love had returned, not in the way he expected, but in a way he never would have dared to hope for. He didn't just save 3 girls that night, they saved him too.